Yes. So again, my name is Jennifer, and we're here to learn about healthy minds and healthy bodies. And then Health in Hand is that service that can help with it. That is the team that I work with on 365 Health. So stress is a word that is really thrown out there very commonly, but we never really take the time to kind of look at it and look at the word itself and what that means. So what stress really is just the experience of changes in your body and your body responding to them. And so that's actually a response that's left over from even back in the caveman days. If, like, let's say there was a caveman and he saw a dinosaur in the distance, he's going to get stressed out, and his body is going to make him feel stressed out, because that's the body telling you, hey, you should make some changes. You need to do something in order to preserve your well-being. And so that same response is still within our bodies. And that's what happens when there's lots of changes, good or bad changes. Your body still perceives those as stress. So again, good stress and bad stress. We'll talk a little bit about what can qualify as good or bad stress. But really all things that are stress are just any changes that are going on either within you or in your surroundings. So looking at this chart here, what can happen if you have too low stress? So I did a presentation similar to this before, and a lady asked me, is it possible for me to get rid of all of my stress, like just completely? And I said, well, that sounds nice in theory, but if you were to do that, your stress would be too low. And stress can sometimes be what motivates us to do things, or to get things done, or to come up with new ideas. Again, it motivates us to kind of make some changes in order to improve our well-being. So that's what can kind of happen if there's absolutely no stress, or your stress is too low. You can start to feel bored, you can start to feel depressed, and a little bit tired or lethargic. We kind of want to shoot for that middle spot where it's just right, and where you have just enough stress. And again, stress is changes. So you have just enough changes or new things in your life that kind of motivate you and give you some energy to do new things, or to try new things, or to keep working on new things. So kind of if you think about when you start a new job, you kind of have a lot more energy going into that job because of all the new things that you're learning, all of that positive stress that's kind of coming in, and all of those changes that are motivating you to learn. Where we kind of usually tend to fall is where there's too much stress. And if you have too much stress, then you can quickly kind of get some anxiety, become very overwhelmed, and it can kind of take a toll on your mental health and your body. And so we'll talk about how stress affects your body as well. So wellness. So looking at wellness, wellness is something, again, that's also a very common word that's kind of thrown out there, but essentially what wellness is practicing healthy habits to get better physical and mental health. And so that's not just tied to eating healthy and exercising, though those can be really good and is always recommended, but wellness can really be affected by a lot of things in your life. And so we're going to go through how all of these different aspects of wellness can affect somebody, and how we can kind of have better control over those in order to have better wellness in our lives. Any questions before I move on? Okay. So the first is physical wellness, which we're all familiar with, but how your body reacts to stress is really kind of interesting depending on how much stress you have and where it's kind of coming from. So stress doesn't just stay in your mind. It's not just something that you have stressful thoughts and that's it. Your body kind of responds to that stress because it's where that's drawing the energy from. So for example, if you have something very stressful on your mind, you might get some dizziness, you might get some headaches. I think we've all kind of experienced that before, but something that can also happen is that you get some nausea, your stomach starts to hurt, you can start to hyperventilate. All of those are things and signals from our bodies telling us, hey, there's something going on and I'm trying to alert you of it. But sometimes we can't really recognize those signs. And so this is something that if you can kind of have check-ins with yourself, you can see, was this, stomach ache that came up, does it start at the same time of another stressful change? And if it did, then it's probably tied to that. And so that can be helpful kind of insight to have with yourself, because if you're talking to a doctor or something, and you're able to give them a little bit more context on when did this issue start, that can be really helpful in order to not misdiagnose something. And stress can come in a lot of different ways. And so long-term stress can kind of result in lower immune systems, because your body is exerting so much energy to try to keep up with that stress, that your immune system doesn't quite have the resources that it needs to keep up with that. And so that can result in people that get colds more often, are always sniffling, or just kind of tend to get sick really easily. That can be a result of really long-term stress. And so that's because, when you're running, for example, you can get tired very easily. You can run really quick for a short period of time, but your body is that's going to take a toll on your body. And so when somebody is stressed out or in that survival mode, the same thing kind of happens. So social well-being. So what is social well-being? That's really the connections with your friends, family, coworkers, anybody around you. And so the way that social well-being can affect you is that depending on who is in your social circle, that can either be positive or negative. So, looking at who is in your social circle and doing some reflection on, are these social interactions supporting me and supporting my wellness or increasing my stress? And so looking at that a little bit, and then why? Those are things that we can do reflection on and see, well, what needs to change? Am I not feeling that I am supported by the people surrounding me, that they don't accept me, or that they don't respect my boundaries? And so those are things that you can check in with yourself of every time that I tell my family, oh, I only want to see you on Saturdays, and they come in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, that's going to cause you some stress. And because those boundaries aren't respected, that'll take a toll on your social well-being. Also, being involved with the community is very important. So if somebody is in a community, like let's say in Denver or something, and there's a lot of social events going on and they're not involved in that community, that can help make you feel very isolated, and it can make you feel like you are not supported. And so looking at, am I having positive interactions with the community? When I go with my neighbors, are they happy to see me, or are they giving me mean looks? Those are the kind of things that can create stress, and that tends to add up. So stress isn't just one big event, but it can be a combination of a lot of little things that kind of bring you to a boiling point. So spiritual. So this doesn't just mean anything with religion or anything like that, but really your spirituality can be coming from having a purpose or meaning in life. So when I talk with older folks, some of them run like the bingo nights or something like that, and that's giving them a sense of feeling or purpose. And where that comes in with your physical wellness is that there are benefits to having a balance within your spirituality, because when you have that, you tend to have better sleep. If you know that you have purpose in life and the things that you're doing in your day-to-day actions are aligning with what your spirituality or your morality is, you're going to tend to sleep better because you know that you're doing things that you respond well to. One thing that is really correlated with spirituality can be mindfulness and breathing. And so taking big breaths, meditating, those types of things can actually increase your immune system, because you're giving your body the oxygen that it needs and that recovery time that it needs for it to recuperate itself. And when I was doing my research for this presentation, I saw a study with AIDS patients. And so they actually tracked how those patients that were taking medication to do some cell regeneration or to recover from that, when they saw that when people would meditate and take that time to let their bodies recover, they actually had better results. So kind of looking at, am I giving my body the time to catch up with all of the stress of the day? This can also help lower blood pressure, because if you don't feel so stressed out and you don't feel that there's things that you don't agree with going on, that will result in some lower blood pressure, because you don't have, again, that fight or flight response as happening as often. Environmental wellness. So the environment isn't just kind of, we tend to think with the environment like pollution or global warming. Those are all things that do come into this, but environmental wellness is really about being in a pleasant and stimulating environment. So I have a photo here, and this example is of an environment that is built for pedestrians. So if you kind of look in your surroundings, are the areas around me built for cars or for people walking for public transportation? And that can have an effect on your wellness depending on which of those people you are, if you're the pedestrian or the person in the car. So for example, here they have really good barriers for in front of the people that are walking, and that's going to help their wellness feel a little bit better, because they know that they're not in danger of getting hit by a car. There's good protections for them, and there's clean streets. The sidewalks are nice and big. Somebody that, for example, uses a wheelchair would easily be able to access these. And so their environmental wellness is going to be higher because that is a supportive environment. And so taking time, usually, when we pick somewhere to live, we factor in other things. So like the school districts or how close is this to work, but we don't sometimes take time to think about what do I like and dislike about my environment. And so that's something that when you take that into consideration, you can kind of be more, when you're aware of what you do and don't like, you start to notice things more. And then when you make a decision either to move or focusing on what places you like to visit, you can be more in touch with the things that you do or don't like. We have here, this is the Colorado Enviro screen, and we can open this link if you'd like. But what that has is actually, it has a map of all of Colorado, and it ranks areas depending on their scores. And so it has two big scores. It has a lot of different types of things that it measures, but the two big ones is that on that map, it'll show you, let's say if we look at Adams County, the score for that area would be depending on how much pollution and how much they are affected by climate change. So that's something that you can look at and see, how is this affecting my environment? Am I in an area that has high levels of pollution? Am I in an area that is really affected by climate change? Because those are things that even if you don't notice it, those are changes going on in your environment that will affect you and can affect your health as well. If there's a lot of pollution or if they have contaminated water, that's something that you can see through this map. And that is something that you can consider of, am I having symptoms of poor water systems? Am I having symptoms of a lot of pollution in the air? Those types of things. Another measure that they have are health and social factors scores. So that will actually look at how in that area, how dense are the amount of people that qualify as having a disability or having high health issues or having lots of social issues such as crime or those types of things. So in this map, you can kind of look at your area and see, am I in an area that is more likely to have higher rates of crime or higher rates of health issues? Occupational wellness. So this is having personal satisfaction from work. And we do have to keep in mind that we have to be realistic about what our reality is of what we can change. So obviously we can't just all pick up and quit our jobs to do something that would be more fun because we have responsibilities and those types of things. But looking at within the work that I am in, how is this affecting me? Am I getting really sick all the time? Do I feel really burnt out? Do I feel respected in my work area? Looking at those types of things will also affect your wellness, because if you're in a very negative environment, you're not going to have very high morale. You're not going to be very motivated to be productive, and you're probably going to miss work more often because you don't want to be there, and that's not an environment that is supporting you. So one thing that you can kind of do to look at your occupational wellness is taking time after a stressful event. So let's say you have a really bad meeting, it doesn't go well, taking time to look at it and kind of debriefing on it can be really helpful, because if you kind of go from stressful event to stressful event, it's going to add up and you're going to get burnt out really fast. So again, taking just some time to reflect, and that sounds very, abstract, but really if you kind of take time, you can better understand yourself and what affects you, and that can help you with understanding others as well, because you can say, I know that how this affects me, I know that this makes me angry and feel burnt out, so other people are probably feeling the same way, and that can kind of help that create that supportive environment. For people, especially, it doesn't matter if you do physical labor, if you do construction, or if you're at an office job, stretching can be a really good thing to do, because our bodies are meant to do a lot of different types of activities. And so when we're repeatedly doing the same action, that again is a lot of stress on our bodies and can result in injuries or long-term disability or long-term injuries. And so taking time to stretch, there's stretches that you can look up, for office workers or for construction workers. There's different things that you can look up for things that you tend to do, and that can help your body be better prepared. And again, that would reduce how often you're out sick because you pulled a muscle, or that would increase how productive you are because you're not struggling through this pain in order to get your day-to-day job done. One thing that has really kind of come up, especially after COVID, is people that work from home. It's important to have separate workspaces, because if you're always working in the same area that you eat in, that you relax in, that you sleep in, that really, your brain makes correlations. And so that's why sometimes when people work from their bed or something, they have a hard time sleeping, because your brain attributes certain ideas and certain thoughts with areas. And so if you're working in the same area that you're sleeping, your brain's going to be in work mode when you're they're trying to shut down. And so what I tend to do is, like, I work from home. I have one area of my counter that I do my work in, and I have another area that I eat my lunch in. And it really has made a difference because you can physically separate yourself from work, even if you're technically still at work. Another one to do is also knowing employment rights, knowing what your rights are, knowing that you have the right to lunch, that you have the right to fair treatment, those types of things. And then knowing kind of on the other end of that, what can turn the worst of that. So what is the difference between labor trafficking and wage theft? Because those are things that are very similar, but the what your rights are can be very different depending on those qualifications. So again, with occupational wellness, it's something that we need to be realistic as adults of what is within my control, but what can I do to improve this situation? Any questions? Nope. Okay.
Oh. Sorry, Jennifer, there is a question in the chat.
Yeah.
What is labor trafficking? Could you define that or give us more information about that?
Yeah, definitely. So what labor trafficking is with human trafficking, people tend to think of sexual exploitation, but really anything that has the elements of force. So someone being forced to do something either physically or mentally, fraud. So if they lied to you about the terms of that employment, or force, fraud, or coercion. So if someone was manipulated into doing something, that would qualify as labor trafficking. And so what I saw is, for example, somebody that was promised a job on a farm. This was very common with especially like farm workers. They were told, hey, when you come here, you'll have a job lined up for you and you just have to pay me $200 for rent. What ended up happening, and this was the fraud part, is that no, when they came over, now they had to pay that person back for their flight. They had to pay that person back for the food. They had to pay that person back for their rent. And so it ended up actually costing them money to work there. And they become kind of caught up in that circle of, you have to work here because you owe me money. And that can quickly become very hostile and very stressful again. So kind of recognizing those signs of, is my work kind of turning very, putting me in situations that can be coercive, or that are there indicators of fraud? Those are things that can help you feel like you have a little bit more control of your situation, even though we all are kind of in the environment that we have to work to survive. That can help you feel a little bit more in control. Good questions. Any other question? No? Okay. So what is intellectual wellness? So when you think of the word intellectual, you probably think of somebody with glasses in a library reading or doing scholarly stuff, but that's not necessarily what that means. So it means stimulating your brain and kind of working out your brain. So that would be that positive stress that keeps your brain fresh, those new changes that motivate you and cause that small stress, but that can motivate you. So what that would look like is, are you focusing on personal interests? So as parents, a lot of times you kind of focus on your kids' interests and the day-to-day actions that you need to do, but are you taking any time to do something that really you like to do that isn't productive? So not cleaning, because yes, you might not mind cleaning, but that's not something that is for your personal interest. So doing things that really kind of are crafts, sewing, decorating, doing things that, even if it's not something that is, again, beneficial or actually scholarly and academic, is this something that drives your brain to start thinking and is interesting to you? One thing that you can do is trying something new. So even if you haven't tried a new food, if you haven't tried this activity, that will, again, work out your brain, and it'll give it that new stimulation that it needs to stay fresh and keep those neural pathways fresher. Something that is also in Colorado, we have a lot of different cultures here. So one thing that you can do is going to different cultural events, because that will be a lot of new things that you're seeing, a lot of new people, a lot of new food, a lot of new music or decorations. And so those are things that, again, can be creative in finding new ways to find new skills and knowledge that you don't have already, and keeping that brain worked out. So the brain is also a muscle. So even like if you think about your arm muscles, if you don't use them a lot, they kind of start to go down. And so the same goes for your brain. It's a muscle. And so the more that you use it and the more that you bring new things to it and kind of push it to different ways, the fresher that it'll stay. So financial wellness. So again, setting non-judgmental goals. So what financial wellness doesn't mean how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't mean how much your debt to income ratio is. What it means is your satisfaction with current and future financial plans. So even if you are unsatisfied with where you are financially, that's fine. I think everybody wishes they were in a different place than they are financially. But what it is looking at what your goals are and setting them in a non-judgmental way. So really looking at what is the best option for me, not, my neighbor has 3 cars, so I have to have 3 cars. Looking at what your goals are and looking at where you want them to be and why. Like, why do I want the 3 cars? Is it because I actually need 3 cars, or is it because I feel everyone in my neighborhood has 3 cars, so I need to have 3 cars? That can really kind of help you tailor your financial goals a little bit to make them more meaningful and increase your financial wellness because you're more satisfied with where your finances are going. One thing that you can do to do that is determining the value of finances. So for example, if you get paid $20 an hour, okay, that is the value for that time frame. So if you think about it, is that time that I could be instead using for my emotional wellness, to do things in my community, to spend time with my kids? Is it, what is that value, and how is that kind of that exchange going? If yes, of course, everybody needs money, but we also need other things. And so if we're always trading in our time for money value, we might not get that value from the other things that we should be doing. And then some community organizations that are really helpful with finances. There's a community organization called Adelante, and they have really great programs for people that are small business owners. They have classes, and that you guys have a similar format where you take classes to increase your learning. They have things for small business owners where they teach you on finances, they teach you on how to set up your taxes for businesses, and they help connect you with other resources to help your business grow. So that's one good resource that you guys could have if you're interested in starting a business or you have a business. Growing Home is another great resource, and what they do is family supports. So they help with people that if they are at risk of losing their home, if they have people that are needing clothes or food, those types of things. So that's an organization that can kind of help with more of the day-to-day stuff, and making sure that your financial wellness, that you can get to a place that you need to be, because of course everyone can fall on hard times, and it can be really hard to set financial goals when you have no finances. And then libraries. I think libraries are very kind of undersold on how great they are. They have things, you can rent a hotspot for your internet for a whole week and renew it every time as long as someone else doesn't need it. So that's one way that, you don't have to worry so much about needing high-speed internet or anything like that, because you can borrow a hotspot. They have something like, if you really are tight on money, you need to cancel Netflix, they have something where you can download free movies and stream new movies and shows for free. And they have books that you can download as well, like we all know. And they have a lot of different types of resources too. So really looking at your libraries and seeing what are the resources that they have, because they tend to have more resources than you would think. They have things to download music and a lot of different things. So emotional wellness. So I think emotions is something that a lot of people kind of shy away from that word, because nobody wants to be emotional. I think emotional is given a really bad connotation. But what emotional wellness really is how do you cope with life, and how do you create satisfying relationships? So life is hard for everybody. There's so many things going on. There's finances, there's family, there's all these things and pressures that you have. But how are you coping with that? Are you doing well with it? Or is it really kind of, you're just taking it day by day and treading water? So talking with yourself of, how am I coping with my children? How am I coping with my family? How am I coping with all these different things, can kind of help you have a check-in of how you're doing. And then from there, if you have kind of an idea of, do I need to improve it, or am I at a good place? One thing you can also ask of yourself is, do I feel safe at my job? Do I feel safe in my relationships or my community? Because if you don't feel safe, you're kind of, again, in that survival mode. And it's hard to thrive if you're in survival mode. And so once you have that safe feeling and that feeling of stability, it's a lot easier to go from there and to build off of it. Something else that you can do and is important to do, especially with children, is looking at mental health history. So does my family have a history of mental health? They might have not called it anxiety or depression, but did they show those symptoms? Because if they did, then you're more likely to have that mental health history as well. And then your children are also more likely to have it. And so the more informed that you can be on the symptoms of depression and anxiety, the better that you can recognize it if your children start to show them, or if your spouse or somebody around you does, and then you can get them help faster instead of waiting for a really big tragedy to happen or a really big cry for help to happen. You can get them that help sooner. And then also looking at the stigma of emotional and mental health. So again, emotional health and mental health is something that I think because of the movies and because of the media, we really see when we think of mental health as somebody that is, like in a behavioral hospital and has a straitjacket and is, doing all these things. And though that is, psychosis can have some effects like that, that isn't necessarily all that mental health is. Mental health can also just look like somebody that's having a hard time, that gets really overwhelmed. It can look like a lot of different things. And so recognizing that stigma can be helpful, especially if you have children that have mental health issues. You don't want to pass on that stigma to them because that will negatively affect how they see themselves since they're displaying those symptoms. So again, creating an environment that makes people feel safe to come to you with emotional concerns or with mental health concerns. And so one activity that you can kind of do is like this scale that's here with the smiley faces is looking at, okay, today, where is my anxiety or my depression? Do I feel, some mild fears and worries? So I would be at like a 4. But then if you do this every day for like a week and you're at a 10 every day, then you can say, okay, this is too much. I need to make a change. So that's one way that you can determine, was it just a bad day or am I actually in a situation that is causing me a lot of stress and anxiety? And so the next generation of wellness. So obviously you guys are here for your kids. You guys are here because you are trying to get them into better schools, get them into better situations, and really increase your knowledge and their knowledge of life and everything around them, which is fabulous. And I really commend you guys for doing that because it's really hard to not only try to navigate everything in your day-to-day lives, but still create a big change. But with wellness in this next generation and the younger generations, the conversation of it is actually a lot more common. So there's a lot more wellness apps. There are a lot more kind of yoga apps or spas or even things like that are self-care. That's just a word that is actually very popular and kind of new because it's something that people are seeing that is needed. And again, because that stigma is going down on mental health, we kind of recognize the need for that wellness. So looking at, sometimes, especially with different cultures or with different values, we can say, oh, children are just very sensitive nowadays, or, oh, everybody's getting diagnosed with anxiety. But one way that we can look at it is that maybe now we are just better able to recognize those things. And so that's why it seems like it's a lot more common. So again, looking at what are the differences between the way that I was taught wellness and the way that our children are being taught about this concept. Something else that is kind of going on is workers are changing their expectations of wellness and how they're treated at work, which I think is great for the workers because really that's how we need to do it in order for people to not burn out. So we're seeing a lot of nurses that quit being nurses because they're just so overwhelmed, or a lot of doctors. And so really looking at how do we keep that workforce healthy so that society can keep moving? Because if everybody stops working because they're burnt out, we're going to have a lot of big problems. And then modeling behaviors. So that looks like, let's say you have a really rough day and you accidentally yell at your spouse or something. Yes, that isn't great to take your frustration out, but if you start to say, oh, I'm just such a bad person, or oh, I'm just so dumb, blah, 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 your children will pick up on that. And that's how they will approach their own wellness and how their own behaviors. So looking at, instead of saying, never admitting you're tired, or never admitting, oh, this really stressed me out, that can actually create some negative behaviors for children because then they think it's not okay to ever say I'm tired or express how they're actually feeling, which is really important for us to be able to keep track of what are they needing. So again, reflecting on how do I treat myself in regards to these things and what kind of message is that sending towards the kids. Like I mentioned, cultural differences. So not only is it different languages, there's different words for things, but there's also different stigmas because of culture and how they view gender roles or how they view people that work. So a lot of time we'll see people and they, like, let's say my family's from Mexico. And so, you're always told kind of just tough it out. And that's something that can be culturally based. And so that's something that we have to look at. Our children might be in a new culture and they're getting a different message from all of society of, no, you don't have to tough things out. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about your feelings. And that can cause some conflict between families because there's two different ideas going on about the same issue. So again, looking at where are my ideas of wellness coming from and how are they affecting the situation that my child is in. So habits. So again, wellness isn't just something that will happen overnight. It would be great if it was, but wellness is a habit. And so that's something that you kind of have to learn and then practice over and over. So not being so hard on yourself if you don't do things perfectly the first time, but just saying, what did I learn from this? And then repeating it again. So that way you can improve each time. So when you're trying to pass on wellness with your children, what are they learning from, this time that something really stressful happened? Okay, talking about what did you learn? And then next time that we're in that situation, what can we do differently? Instead of looking at, oh, that went so badly, or oh, you did terrible. Kind of just reframing things to be a little bit more constructive instead of so critical of behaviors. And then also positive encouragement. So that's something that if you see your child practicing good behavior or saying, I had a really stressful day today, I need some time to myself, encouraging that and saying, thank you for telling me that. That's really helpful. I want to hear how you're feeling, or things like that. That is that type of encouragement that will make the children feel, okay, this is something that I should be doing. This is something good. And so they'll keep doing those types of behaviors. Any questions? Okay. So how can we help? So now we know all about stress and wellness and all of these things that we need to work on, but what do we do about it? What that looks like is there can be different things depending on what's affecting your wellness that you need to change or adjust in order to increase it. So of course, with mental health, medication is something that always helps. And again, looking at that stigma and making sure that we're looking at it from a neutral perspective, not as something bad or good. So one example I give is people with diabetes. Mental health is similar in that way, where it's just your brain that's producing too much or too little of something. So not saying, oh, you're crazy, or oh, you're just too emotional, but looking at it as, oh, you need help with this issue. That's something that we can kind of do to make that medication and that acceptance of the medication a lot easier. Lifestyle. So again, if your spirituality and your morality isn't lining up with where you want to be, maybe making some changes and some reflection on what do I need to change in my life, so that way I can sleep a little bit better at night, so I can feel better about how I'm presenting myself in this lifetime. Those types of things. Or like I said, if you are somebody that has asthma and you're in an area that has a lot of pollution in the air, maybe you need to change that, because that's something that's affecting your wellness and is going to affect your overall health. So looking at what do I need from my environment and from the people around me. Nutrition. So this is something that everyone's always told, you need to eat healthy, and I'm not the best at it. I don't think a lot of people are. And that's fine. I think it's really just being realistic of what resources do I have around me. So if you came from a family that didn't have a lot of food growing up, it's going to be hard for you to have healthy recipes and know those things, because you were never taught them. You never knew where to get them from. You were just putting meals together for survival. So looking at, okay, based on the ingredients that I have, which of these ingredients are healthy for me, or which of these ingredients can I put into the recipes I already use, or switch out? Like, can I switch normal fries for potato fries, those are for sweet potato fries? Some simple changes that you can do that won't disrupt your whole lifestyle, but will kind of make it easier for you to practice those small habits and eventually get to the bigger goal of reducing your cholesterol or reducing your blood sugar, those types of things. And then increased access to care. So if somebody is having any of these issues or has wellness that isn't really where they want it to be, what care do they have available to them? So looking at, is my community supportive? Are my doctors, are they easy for me to access? Do I have a doctor? Is my insurance going to cover these things? Looking at what are the cares that you have available, and then looking at what else do I need and what resources are available. And one thing with the Health in Hand that we do is that it can help with a lot of these things, because it's care that you can just talk to them right there on your phone whenever you need in the middle of the night. And so it makes that care a lot more accessible, instead of having to make an appointment, wait for the appointment in 3 weeks, and then go across town to that appointment. Those are all things that can help reduce a lot of that stress and make that wellness a lot more feasible. Any questions? Thank you. So this was a shorter presentation because I think that it's important, after learning about wellness, if we can take some time to look at, we'll go back to that chart of where am I in my wellness cycle and which of these should I improve? And so maybe sometimes looking at it of, I rank this wellness measure as a 10 and this one as a 2. That can give you a better idea of where do I need to start and which ones of these are most important for me to improve, instead of trying to take on everything at once. And of course, this is my email and our website. So we'll go back to that chart. Okay. And so kind of if you have paper near you, you can look at this and write them down and then say, give yourself a ranking from 1 to 10. And again, that's not a judgmental ranking. It's not saying, oh, my occupational wellness is just awful, but looking at it from a neutral point of where do I want to be with this? So we'll take some time to do that. And so at 7:40, we'll kind of reconvene and then we'll all ask you guys to just kind of say, what is the measure of this wellness? Which of these dimensions of wellness are you most interested in improving, or do you feel that you need to improve more? And so we'll just send that in the chat because sometimes it can be helpful to see, oh, other people also are struggling with this.
So there's a question in the chat.
Mhm.
Are there any statistics that show these areas in distress based on age ranges? Like, are there any areas that are worse for different age groups than others?
I think that's a good question. And I think it's really hard to get those statistics because it just really depends on that person's, again, lifestyle and how are the other things affecting one measure. So if we were to just look at physical health, we might see that older people have higher statistics of physical health issues, but we're not factoring in that they might not have had that environmental support, or that they grew up in a polluted environment, or that they did a lot of physical labor. So I think we can look at those statistics, but looking at them with more of a kind of a critical glance of what could have caused these things, because yes, it is going to be different depending on age, but it also just depends on where that person is living, what other things are affecting them, and what supports they have available. Because somebody that grew up with a lot of medical support or a lot of those types of things are definitely going to have a lot less health issues when they're older. Alrighty, okay, so we are at time. You can take more time if you need, and then we can always send this picture if you need or anything, but if you could please type which of these measures you would like to improve the most. That is very helpful. So I would like to improve my social wellness a little bit more. I think kind of in life as you go on, friends come and go, and it just really, when you're in a transitional period of your life, there can be a lot of changes that cause that stress. Again, stress is caused by changes, but when you look at it of what types of friends do I want in my life, and what is my capacity? Because if you're really busy with work, it's hard to maintain a lot of those relationships and friendships. Cool, yes, so a lot of physical. Which makes sense because if your physical health is kind of out of whack, it's hard to balance the rest of these things. So thank you. Emotional, physical, financial. Perfect. Yes. So as you see, you're not the only people struggling with emotional or physical or financial wellness. Kind of everybody in this group has a combination of wanting to work on all of these things. And so it's nice to see that you're not the only person struggling with it, because I think that's where a lot of that negative thinking of, oh, I'm the only person that isn't catching up with the rest of the people comes in. And it's nice to have that perspective that other people are also having trouble with it. Perfect. So with this, I think that, after talking about wellness, it's really hard when there's not a lot of hours in the day. So if if it's okay with the group, I think that, if you have one of these measures that you identified that you want to work on, taking some time to look at what things in my life can I change, or what am I needing to improve those things. So we don't really get a lot of time because we are so busy to look at that. So I think that, that would be kind of the homework for me, is that you guys take this hour that's left over, not to do something that's necessarily productive, but really taking that time and investing it in yourself of what do I need to fix in order to get to this point, or to improve this measure that I'm looking at. One thing that has helped me. Yeah, so looking at what would make each area 10. So yeah, it's hard to improve things if you don't know what needs to be improved. So again, that reflection can be really helpful. And it can also be helpful for when you're talking to other people, talking to your friends of, this is what I did, and this is what I was struggling with, and this is what I did to help. Any other questions? All right.
So a comment in the chat about scheduling your priorities for these types of things instead of prioritizing your schedule. I think the person's meaning like actually getting these things on the schedule if you intend for them to happen.
Yeah, because I mean, life can get really busy. And so if you actually put some time, like for example, I had someone that said the only time I have to myself is when I'm showering because my kids are always running around and doing all these things. So what she did is she started starting the shower 10 minutes before she usually would. She would usually shower at like 7. And so she really had that time where she just shut herself in the bathroom and had some time to look at herself, look at her day, and think about, okay, what went right today and what would I have liked to go differently? So making sure that you have that time set aside to invest into these things because it's hard to improve things if you never invest the time into doing it. So yeah, really, really good.
And then besides the self-reflection, how else can we figure out how to improve our areas of wellness?
So I think once you identify the things that need to be fixed is looking at the resources that are around you. So you can talk with community organizations, like we mentioned, on what things they can do to help. So if you want to increase your financial wellness, are there financial wellness classes that you can take? So that way you have the information you need to make that better. Or if you want to increase your physical wellness, talking with your doctor about, hey, what is in my body that is making me feel unwell and what things would I need to do to change those? So I think it depends on the measure. And then just looking at, okay, what is around me that can help me? And if there isn't something that I need, who can I talk to get it? Because sometimes our friends can be really resourceful and they have gone through the same struggles. And so they can say, oh, I went to this organization and they really helped me. Or, oh, I know somebody that has started a small business and they can give you some advice on what to do. So looking at those types of things depending on the issue. All right, well then I think, yeah, making sure that you take that hour again, not to cook or clean or do things that you do need to catch up on, but investing that first hour into yourself and into that reflection, because it's easy to say and have that intent to always do these things, but unless you take that first step to set aside the time to do it, it's hard to build that habit. So use this as an opportunity to really get that started and set yourself up with a plan of every Wednesday, I want to have this check-in with myself, or every Tuesday. So looking at what in the future can I plan out or move around to help with this. I do think just becoming aware of the gap between you. Yeah, so being curious about the solution. So I think, again, it sounds really kind of frilly to just say, oh, I'm going to reflect on myself, but it's really valuable, because if you don't take that time, then you just kind of go on in the day-to-day motions and you're doing the same things without reflecting on, okay, what would I have liked to do differently? And time goes by very fast. And so it's important to kind of have that pause moment to see and use the best, have the best use of your time in the future. And then how do we get the picture? It's not on the screen anymore. Yeah, so we can, do you guys have an email that I can send this to, or I can pull it up and then you guys can take a photo with your phone? Are you guys able to see my screen?
If you send it to Melissa, she could send it out with the evaluations.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, thank you guys. Again, please take that time for yourself. I know there's 100 other things that you could use this hour for, but it's important to invest in yourself.